My name is Sarah. Before I got married, I worked full-time at a job with terrible working conditions. I often had to work almost 90 hours of unpaid overtime every month. It was exhausting and bad for my health. I'd even thought about working with my husband, but the toxic environment made me decide to quit when we got married. Now, I live a much healthier life. I wake up and go to bed at regular times, and my health has improved a lot since leaving that job. My husband supported my decision to quit and often said how happy he was to come home to a wife who greeted him and took care of the house. I'm really lucky, he used to say a lot in the early days of our marriage. It's now been 5 years since we got married, and things have settled into a routine. That's normal, I think, but over time, some issues have started to show up. One big problem is my mother-in-law. Every time we visit her, she always asks, "When will I get to see my grandchildren?" She only asks this when my husband isn't around. Hearing this again and again over the years has been really stressful for me. To be honest, I've started to dread visiting her because of the pressure. My father-in-law, on the other hand, is much quieter and doesn't interface, so I get along with him better. As for kids, my husband doesn't want any. He thinks raising children is a lot of work and very expensive. But when we're with his parents, even if he's there, he doesn't step in to stop his mom from pressuring me. It's tough to deal with on my own. One day, I asked my husband, "Since you're the one who doesn't want kids, can you explain that to your parents?" But his response was, "That's something women should handle between themselves." He often uses phrases like, "Because I'm a man" or "because you're a woman," to avoid uncomfortable situations. This leaves me in an even worse position, and my mother-in-law views me as a childless wife who is fully supported by her husband. I finally reached my limit and decided to speak up. I told her, "Actually, it's my husband who doesn't want children." Her response was harsh. "Oh sure, you can't keep saying that. He must have manipulated you into saying it. Aren't you ashamed of blaming others instead of taking responsibility for your inability to have children?" My father-in-law sometimes tries to convince her to stop pressuring us about children, reminding her that it's our decision. But my mother-in-law is selfish and doesn't listen to anyone else's opinions. The truth is, my husband finds the idea of raising children stressful and doesn't want to deal with the challenges. He also doesn't want to upset his mother, so he avoids the topic entirely, trying to keep her happy. I've come to realize how unreliable he is. If we were ever in a crisis, like a sinking ship, he'd probably choose his mother over me. When I talked to my mom about all this, she responded calmly, "Well, at least you're not living with her. That's something to be grateful for." Over the past year, I've been venting to my mom a lot about my husband and his mother. She's a quiet person, but she always listens patiently and helps ease my frustrations. Since I got married, I sometimes feel guilty about complaining to my parents. I worry it might mean I'm not a good daughter-in-law. But with everything going on, I can't rely on my husband for support, so the only person I can talk to is my mom, even though she lives far away. "I'm sorry for always bothering you with my complaints," I told her once. She replied, "Don't worry about it. I'm fine now. I even had a medical checkup recently, and everything is okay." My mom had heart surgery 3 months ago and had a pacemaker implanted. I was really worried at first, but she reassured me with a smile, saying, "I'm fine." When I told my husband about her surgery, his reaction surprised me. He just said, "Nowadays, having a pacemaker isn't unusual. There's no need to worry so much." I couldn't help but remember how, when his mother sprained her ankle, I was expected to take care of her and do all the housework as if it was my duty. I muttered to myself, having heart surgery is definitely more serious than a sprained ankle. I often feel like I'm letting my parents down because I live so far away and can't visit them often. But this time, I wanted to do something special for my mom's birthday. My dad and I planned a small surprise. When my husband came home, I greeted him as usual. "Welcome back. Dinner's ready," I said as I served the meal. While we ate, I mentioned, "My mom's birthday is coming up soon." He barely reacted, so I added, "I've booked a really nice invite as a surprise for her." Oh, really? That sounds nice, he said, still not showing much interest. I explained more, hoping to get a better reaction. This inn is famous and luxurious in our area. I even got a great deal on a fancy room through a friend. At the mention of the word luxurious, his eyes lit up. Suddenly, he was interested and even started looking at pictures of the place with surprise and excitement. As we discussed the trip, my husband asked, "This place really has a luxurious atmosphere. Either way, we're staying in separate rooms from your parents, right?" "Yes, exactly. My dad and mom are coming too. Let's visit the tourist spots by the sea together and spend time with them," I replied, hoping this could be a positive experience for all of us. After thinking for a moment, he said, "Yeah, that might be a good idea." Hearing that, I felt relieved. Usually, I only spend time with his parents, so the thought of being with my family felt refreshing and different. Thankfully, I didn't have to plan everything. My self-made parents had already arranged the hotel and schedule. It made me feel slightly guilty, like I was being spoiled rather than helping out. A week later during dinner, my husband asked, "When is the trip? I need to apply for time off." "It's on the 23rd and 24th. I told you about it before, remember?" "Oh, good thing I asked," he replied while checking his phone. His expression didn't change much. I sighed. Inwardly, he really didn't seem to care much about my family. But I thought to myself, maybe his mild interest is better than no interest at all. The day of the trip arrived, and we drove to the luxurious inn in San Diego. My parents had flown in the day before and had already stayed a night. Today, we planned to explore the nearby tourist spots as a family and enjoy a fancy dinner at the inn's restaurant. As we drove, I relaxed in the passenger seat, flipping through a travel magazine about the area. I thought about how nice it would be to park the car, meet my parents in the lobby, and enjoy some quality family time. But when we arrived, I was surprised. My parents were already waiting for us not in the lobby, but in the parking lot. Even more shocking, standing beside them was someone I never expected to see, my mother-in-law. I couldn't hide my surprise. Meanwhile, my husband calmly parked the car, acting as though everything was completely normal. His movements were quick and purposeful, and his expression seemed unusually resolute. I was completely confused and struggling to make sense of the situation. What is going on here? I thought everything had been clearly planned out. I quickly got out of the car and hurried after my husband, still trying to understand. To my surprise, he was already speaking casually to my parents. "Thank you for booking such a nice place to stay," he said smoothly. "By the way, my parents will be joining us starting tomorrow. The accommodations are already paid for, right?" My parents were understandably shocked. This was completely unexpected. Then my mother-in-law, as bold as ever, chimed in, "This place is lovely. We'll be in your care from now on. Either way, let's plan a trip to the mountains next time. Please arrange that too." My father-in-law, looking just as confused as we were, turned to my husband and asked, "Wait, didn't you invite us on this trip? And didn't you say you'd cover all the travel expenses?" Hearing this, I felt my face burn with anger. I turned to my husband and demanded, "What is going on? This inn was booked by my parents. Why did you invite your parents without asking me?" My mother-in-law immediately interjected, "What's the problem? Isn't it fine? It would be selfish to keep such a wonderful place all to yourselves. You should cherish your husband's parents more." I was stunned. From my perspective, this trip was a special opportunity to spend time with my parents, especially since I rarely see them. Today was my mom's birthday, and I wanted to celebrate and show my appreciation for her. I explained this carefully, trying to keep my emotions in check. But my mother-in-law just smirked and said, "What about me? Don't you ever think of me? I've never received a birthday present before. Are you discriminating against me or something?" I was taken aback. But didn't I just send you a bouquet of your favorite flowers recently?" I replied. "That was a gift from my son, not directly from you," she snapped dismissively. I looked at my husband, hoping for support, but he just stared into the distance, avoiding my gaze. I felt a surge of frustration. Have you been letting her believe you're the one picking out those gifts? I've been the one choosing them ever since we got married, I asked, glaring at him. His response was completely unbelievable. Well, you bought it using my money, so it's basically the same as if I chose and paid for it, my husband said coldly, his expression showing how annoyed he was. Besides, you married into this family, so obviously my parents should come first. You should be sending my mother gifts instead. I was stunned. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. His harsh words left me speechless, and I just stood there in disbelief. This wasn't the man I thought I'd married. My mother-in-law seized the moment and jumped in. Exactly. This is a wonderful opportunity for us to enjoy time together as a family. Her confidence and boldness caught me off guard. She spoke so clearly and unapologetically, and I found myself wondering where the kind and understanding man I'd married had disappeared to. Just then, a slightly overweight middle-aged man in a fancy suit approached us hurriedly. If there's anything troubling you, please don't hesitate to let me know, he said politely. My mother-in-law wasted no time. She began speaking rapidly, almost like a machine gun. We'd like to stay here. We want to take the remaining nights that these people have booked. The man, whom I'll call Uncle, bowed politely and replied, I truly apologize, but we cannot accommodate their request. Hearing his refusal, my mother-in-law's face darkened with anger. Why not? She demanded loudly. The guests have already paid for their stay, and they're scheduled to be here until the day after tomorrow, Uncle explained calmly but firmly. Still not satisfied, my mother-in-law turned and pointed at me. This girl is our daughter-in-law. It's only natural that her family's belongings should be treated as our own. My husband nodded silently, as if agreeing with her, and that was the last straw for me. Something inside me snapped. Uncle, noticing the tension, bowed his head once more. Unfortunately, that will not be possible, he said with a calm yet resolute tone. My mother-in-law immediately spoke up. Wait a minute, if low-income, unlucky people stay here, won't it ruin the reputation of this hotel? She said sharply. My husband, riding on her momentum, joined in and started criticizing me as well. Trying to shift the situation, I approached my husband quietly and said firmly, Actually, this place is my father's childhood home. Both my husband and mother-in-law looked at me in shock. What? They said in unison, their eyes wide. The man in the suit, who I called Uncle, spoke up with a calm but firm tone. Yes, this inn was my older brother's childhood home. He raised me like a parent when our parents were busy running the inn. I owe him so much, and I'm grateful to be able to manage this place now because of his sacrifices. My father-in-law looked emotional as Uncle continued. When I heard you were staying here, I was happy to return the favor to my brother, but trying to stay for free just because you are the bride's family, that's not acceptable. The room grew quiet. My mother-in-law, who had been so vocal, fell silent. Uncle then added, We do have rooms available for you, ranging from $500 to $2,000 per night. If you'd like to book, please visit the front desk. Hearing the price, both my husband and mother-in-law looked stunned and panicked. What do? We don't know any other inns nearby, my mother-in-law muttered. My husband added, We didn't expect this. What now? Their discomfort was clear, and I silently observed them. Then my father-in-law spoke, addressing my husband. This is the result of your behavior. You've constantly taken credit for Sarah's hard work to look good in front of your mother. And now, look where it's gotten you. My husband had no response. He stood there speechless. My father-in-law then turned to everyone and said sincerely, I deeply apologize for my son and wife's rude behavior. He bowed deeply. Wait, I said, stopping him. I had calmed myself and knew he wasn't entirely at fault. He had been deceived by his son and didn't know the full story. However, my mother-in-law's attitude was different. She seemed to realize something and suddenly spoke up. Well, since this isn't just a family run-in, can't we at least get a special family discount? I was amazed at her boldness. Did she forget all the things she'd said and done up until now? Uncle responded with a calm but firm voice. I cannot recognize someone who disrespects a person I hold dear and love as part of my family." His words hit me deeply. I realized that my mother-in-law and husband had always tried to make me feel inferior. They imposed unfair roles on me and used me for their own benefit, without regard for my feelings. I began to see just how little respect they had for me. If you had cared even a little about my parents, this problem would never have happened, I said firmly, staring at my husband, who was just standing there silently. "So, you've been looking down on me all this time?" He still didn't speak. "Even now, you think you can rely on my parents to fix everything for you. This is terrible," I continued, "but staying at such an expensive, fancy inn is completely out of my budget. I wanted to make a good impression here, but you're making it worse." His frustration and irritation were clear, and I could tell he was upset with me. He looked at me almost accusingly. Meanwhile, my father-in-law, calm but serious, stepped forward. "It's because you always have that attitude that nothing works out. You can't ignore the people who truly matter while trying to impress your mother. You need to think about who you should be protecting right now." My husband stood there, stunned, unable to respond. Father-in-law continued, his expression stern. "You're an adult, a married man, with important responsibilities. The most important thing isn't trying to impress your mother. What matters more is protecting your wife and being on her side." At this, my husband looked away, and I could see a change in his face. It was clear to me now, no matter the situation, he would always choose his mother's side over mine. I took a deep breath and said, "Thank you for everything up until now. You've helped me more than he ever did, but I can't continue this marriage any longer." My husband looked at me, surprised. "Let's get a divorce," I said, and surprisingly, I felt relief in saying it out loud. "I've wanted a divorce for a long time," I continued. My mother's voice quietly reached me from behind. "Are you truly at peace with this decision?" I nodded and answered, "Yes, I've been thinking about it for a long time." My husband, desperate to save face, tried to make excuses. It felt like I was watching someone else's situation unfold. "This isn't just about this incident. Your mother's gift, and everything else that has built up, made me think about this decision. And you?" He paused, and I could see him trying to find the words. "A woman like you, not working, not having children, just eating all the time, should be grateful you're even married." If he had said this to me before, it would have hurt deeply. But now, knowing I would be free from him, it didn't affect me. Living a life where I was constantly put down was not a life I wanted. And then I added, "You might not have heard this from your son, but he didn't want children. He said raising kids would be too much trouble." Did you know that my mother-in-law collapsed when she realized that everything she thought was my fault was actually because of her son? My husband, she was really shocked. After that, my father-in-law took both of them away, and I was finally able to enjoy a family trip with my own parents. "I'm really sorry for making you spend the day like this," I said, feeling sorry from the bottom of my heart. But my mother responded cheerfully, "I just want you to be happy. That's all that matters to me." Honestly, I never thought she could be so strict and difficult. "I regret not noticing sooner how you were doing." "No, I played a big part in tolerating that life," I said, "but I'm really glad this incident helped me realize things." Even my usually quiet and unemotional father looked relieved. Eventually, my husband and I got divorced. Since then, his relationship with his mother seems to have gotten worse. He was never attentive and always left everything to me, except for his work. I heard his apartment is now full of trash and in total mess. Since I left, his mother has been visiting him to help clean up, but it seems like she's finally had enough. They've been arguing a lot, and it even led to a big fight that caused a scene in the neighborhood and brought in the police. As for his father, I heard he thinks this is what happens when you spoil your son too much. He believes this situation is the result of that. At the time, I didn't know that the head of the local community association, who my former mother-in-law was close to, was on the family trip. He saw everything, including her bad behavior, and overheard all of it. Because of this, she got a bad reputation as someone who lacked manners and mistreated her daughter-in-law. which led to our divorce. Her social status dropped a lot after that. On the other hand, I was lucky to find a new opportunity after the divorce. While looking for a job, my uncle offered me a position as a maid at his inn. "Why don't you try working with us?" he said. Even though the other staff doesn't know I'm related to the owner, I'm learning the job from my senior colleagues. The work requires a lot of attention to detail, and while there are still some tasks I haven't mastered, and I occasionally make small mistakes, I feel really happy and fulfilled. I get thanked by the guests for my hard work, and that means a lot to me.